From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 9 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us on this Thursday night. I'm Russ Riesinger. With new measures in place to keep order, President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden went head-to-head at Belmont University, looking to sway undecided voters with less than 2 weeks now until Election Day. Skylar Henry has the latest from Nashville, Tennessee.
President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden squared off for their final debate before Election Day. The president defended his handling of the pandemic.
We closed up the greatest economy in the world in order to fight this horrible disease that came from China. We have a vaccine that's coming. It's ready. It's going to be announced within weeks.
Biden outlined his plan for fighting COVID-19.
I'm going to shut down the virus, not the country. It's his ineptitude that caused the country to have to shut down in large part.
The candidates addressed the topic of interference in the election from overseas.
They will pay a price if I'm elected. They're interfering with American sovereignty.
Nobody tougher than me on Russia. Between the sanctions.
Biden responded to President Trump's claims about the international business dealings of Biden and his son Hunter.
My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China. I have not had it. The only guy who made money from China is this guy.
Your son said we have to give 10% to the big man. Joe, what's that all about?
Even before tonight's debate, about 47 million Americans have already voted, ahead of Election Day, which is just 12 days away.
You know who I am. You know who he is. You know his character. You know my character. You know our reputations for honor and telling the truth. I am anxious to have this race.
You know, Joe, I ran because of you. I ran because of Barack Obama, because you did a poor job. If I thought you did a good job, I would have never run.
They discussed the future of health care.
I'd like to terminate Obamacare, come up with a brand new, beautiful health care.
What I'm going to do is pass Obamacare with a public option.
Polls show there are far fewer undecided voters now than 2016, when President Trump was elected. Skylar Henry, CBS News, Nashville, Tennessee.
Well, the Trump campaign had wanted the entire debate to focus on foreign policy. Nearly 1,000 new confirmed COVID-19 cases reported across Montana today. This along with 3 more deaths. 2 of the victims reported in Dawson County and 1 in Marr County. MTN reports the statewide total of COVID-19 related deaths is now at 293. As for the 932 new positive cases reported by the state today, Yellowstone County reports 173, followed by Flathead with 112, Gallatin with 100, Missoula with 96, and Cascade County with 89. Well, Governor Bullock in Billings today saying we're in for a long and rough road if we don't get the COVID spread under control. At a news conference, Bullock talked about measures being taken to make sure that more people and businesses comply with health orders.
The virus will keep on spreading if there are no protections in place and no accountability to the restrictions that we already have.
Part of the plan to change that in Yellowstone County, which has the most COVID cases in the state, includes hiring 4 COVID education liaison officers using CARES Act money to investigate complaints. County Health Officer John Felton says there have been hundreds of them.
If they do validate the complaint, the business, individual, or organization in violation would receive education about compliance expectations and guidance on how to demonstrate compliance. That business, individual, or organization will also be informed that an unannounced follow-up visit will occur. If a second visit validates the complaint again, evidence gathered by the liaisons would be turned over to the county attorney's office and to me as county health officer.
Felton says that could result in criminal charges from the county attorney and that he also does have the power to close a building down.
Our position at the Billings Chamber of Commerce is that in order to keep the business community at large open, as well as to get the high number of positive cases under control, there must be enforcement behind local and state mandates.
We know how quickly this virus spreads, and as Montanans, we should always put the health of our own employees, friends, and neighbors first.
Bullock also announced the state health department is launching a new website or a web page where people can report concerns. That complaint form can be found on the Department of Health and Human Services website. Former Billings doctor came out of retirement to help with COVID-19 patients in New York and is now bringing that experience home. In May, Dr. Chris Spangen came out of retirement to work at New York University Langone Health. She says in her 30 years, she has not seen an illness like COVID-19. Secondary infection and isolation are two of the big challenges she faced with patients. Now she's back to working in the St. Vincent Intensive Care Unit.
Treating things more aggressively than you might for a normal pneumonia. When someone starts having some troubles with blood pressure or heart rate, cardiac issues, I realize that with this disease, that can actually get worse very quickly and very seriously. The clotting problem, blood clots, was something that was not appreciated to begin with, and yet it's a huge part of this disease.
And we're going to hear more from Dr. Spangen coming up tonight at 10 on Q2. All right, turning to Q2 Chief Forecaster Bob McGuire to tell us more about another blast of winter-like weather. This is a big one.
Well, that first one, it just came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden it lasted for days. This one is going to do the same thing. It's going to last for days. Let me show you how we did just as of yesterday on into today. Check this out. Over at Red Lodge, 4.8 miles west of Red Lodge, they had 28 inches of snow. That's right. Red Lodge Mountain had 25 inches. Luther had 13 inches of snow. Cook City had 11 inches. They had 10 inches over near Immigrant. Burgess Junction had 9. You can see 8.3 over Livingston. Billings Airport, we had 4 inches. We had one inch of snow on the ground at midnight last night. Then an hour up to 5 inches on the ground, and it's still coming down in some places. Now, take a look at our threat board. That is filled in. This is for the new storm, and these are some of the new snowfall amounts we're expecting to get out of this thing. And as you can see in the Billings area, maybe more like 6 to 12 inches of snow, but that's just half the battle. We're expecting some very cold Arctic air moving in, and you can see for the next 4 days, these are going to be our new record low temperatures. Friday morning, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, all going to be new record low temperatures and very cold temps. We'll have more about that coming your way, and the rest of your forecast in a few more minutes. Russ?
All right, thank you, Bob. Well, as the weather turns colder, the need to take care of Billings homeless becomes even greater. The Montana Rescue Mission tells Q2 the team there is ready to help no matter what the weather. Even as they follow distance guidelines, employees say they can house and take care of those in need effectively, all while serving 3 hot meals a day. In the last week alone, they've seen a huge outpouring from the community and increased donations.
You know, this time of year, like tonight, is supposed to be what, 10 degrees, even below that? It'd be really hard to be under a bridge or in your car on the street, and so we stand ready to help people. We've had a real outpouring of community support. With the cold weather, people dropping off coats and blankets, hats and gloves, winter boots, all things that we desperately need. And with the cold weather, the first snow of the year, people call us up and say, how can I help? And we've seen a real outpouring of that, so we're very thankful, and of course we can use more. Coats, hats, gloves, blankets, warm shoes, warm socks.
Well, if you'd like to donate clothing or food to the Montana Rescue Mission, you can simply stop by one of its locations. And Lundgren says they are especially in need of extra large and XXL winter jackets. Things got pretty cute at Rimrock Subaru this morning. Take a look here. Today marked the 2nd annual adoption event with the Yellowstone Valley Animal Shelter. There's some of the dogs. Helped to connect car buyers with canines. Despite the cold outside, the mood inside was fun and festive. Staff at the dealership also brought their own dogs into work to show support for the program.
Well, today is National Make a Dogs Day, and Subaru has invested $28 million to make sure that pets are taken care of and the homeless ones get a home. And we're donating $100 to our local shelter for every pet that's adopted. It's huge for animals that have disabilities, and they make sure that every pet gets a home, or tries to make sure that every pet gets a home.
And Rimrock Subaru will continue to donate $100 for every adoption at the Yellowstone Valley Animal Shelter through the end of this month. With less than 2 weeks now until Election Day, the plan for dealing with a continued surge of COVID-19 cases in Montana still an overriding issue in statewide campaigns, particularly in the contest for governor. MTN Chief Political Reporter Mike Dennison gives us the latest on what the top candidates are saying and doing when it comes to this pivotal issue.
Earlier this week, Democratic gubernatorial candidate Mike Cooney convened a panel of national health experts to talk about the status of vaccines for COVID-19 and what states should be doing to prepare. He followed that up with a list of his priorities, including leading by example, such as wearing a mask, social distancing, and avoiding large gatherings.
To say just personal responsibility and opening up the floodgates gets us the results we see today. With numbers climbing, with deaths climbing, that's not personal responsibility.
That's a not-so-subtle shot at his Republican opponent, Greg Gianforte, whom Cooney and his campaign have chided for rarely wearing a mask at public gatherings and for suggesting a passive stance on public health mandates. When asked whether he would maintain the governor's current emergency order and mask mandates for many counties, Gianforte has demurred. Instead, he's been saying he'll follow the advice of public health professionals and community leaders without being specific.
If I was your governor, we would be focused on keeping the most vulnerable safe. We'd be relying on personal responsibility, not government mandates.
He's also suggested that earlier shutdowns this spring created what he calls an economic pandemic that Montana needs to recover from. Health experts at Cooney's meeting said vaccines should be available within the next several months, but that it will be important to decide who gets it first and how, and to encourage people to take them. Cooney said if he's elected, he'll start work immediately on a distribution plan for the vaccine and a public information plan. He also said he'll work with hospitals, local health departments, and even the National Guard to ensure Montanans are keeping safe during the winter before a vaccine is available.
Vaccines may not be with us all that quickly. I'm working on a plan right now to make sure that we keep Montanans healthy by doing the things we need to do, getting a vaccine, deploying that vaccine the way it needs to be deployed in Montana.
Gianforte says much the same, but again, hasn't come out with specifics, saying it's too early to know what will be needed come January. January is a ways off, but with Montana reporting record daily highs of new cases and winter approaching, this virus doesn't look like it's on its way out anytime soon. Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
Of course, Montanans are voting right now on the governor's race and many others. At last check, more than 320,000 Montanans have already cast their mailed ballots. That's about 50% of the ballots mailed out across the state. The Montana Supreme Court says it will not hear a challenge to a recreational marijuana initiative on the general election ballot. Wrong for Montana, the committee opposing the legalization effort asked the court to invalidate Initiative 190, the group claiming it's an unconstitutional attempt to appropriate state money through a ballot measure. But justices say the group didn't show any appropriate reason or an urgent need for the court to hear the case before it goes through a lower court. Initiative 190 is one of a pair of legalization measures on the ballot. If approved, it would set up a legal framework for recreational marijuana sales and redirect sales tax revenue to things like conservation programs and veterans services. Wrong for Montana Treasurer Steve Sabawa says the group will refile in district court. Well, still ahead on the 9 o'clock news, a near tragedy turns into an incredible story of survival as search and rescue crews brave the conditions to save a Montana woman and her dogs. That story coming up in just a little bit. But first, Bob's back in with a cold and snowy 7-day forecast. We'll be right back.